A body hangs from scaffolding under Blackfriars Bridge in London. Expensive suit. Bricks in the pockets. $15,000 in cash across 3 currencies. The man is Roberto Calvi, chairman of one of Italy's biggest private banks. This is the story of how a Catholic bank used the Vatican's name to borrow over $1 billion it could never repay, and what happened to the man who built the machine. The day before Calvi's body turns up in London, his personal secretary, Graziella Corrocher, falls from a window at Banco Ambrosiano's headquarters in Milan. She leaves a note aimed straight at her boss. May he be cursed 1,000 times for the damage caused to the bank and to the image of the group of which we were once so proud. A banker's secretary dies in Milan. The banker dies in London. 1 day apart. The trail leads to the Vatican. 2 bodies in 2 countries. 1 day apart. That is how this story breaks open. Banco Ambrosiano is one of Italy's biggest private banks, and its main shareholder is the Vatican Bank, formerly the Institute for the Works of Religion, shortened to the IOR. To understand why that matters, you need to understand what the IOR actually is. The Vatican is not just a church, it is a sovereign state, with its own passports, its own diplomatic immunity, and its own bank. When the IOR puts its name on a financial document, international lenders treat that paper the way they would treat a letter from a central bank. Not because the Vatican is rich, but because sovereign institutions do not default. They do not vanish. That assumption is the foundation the entire scam is built on. Calvi is not stupid. He has turned a provincial Catholic bank into an international machine, and that is the problem. He is good enough to build something too big to control. That is the product Calvi is selling. Not interest rates, not returns. Trust backed by sovereignty. Calvi is convicted in 1981 of illegally exporting $27 million. He attempts suicide while awaiting appeal. He stays on as chairman anyway. By the late 1970s, inspectors realize huge sums are flowing through offshore companies the bank cannot support. The mechanism is not complicated. Calvi's bank funnels money into a chain of shell companies, many in Panama, pushing debt into places where ownership is murky and oversight is weak. Then the Vatican Bank issues what are called letters of comfort for these companies. Soft assurances that make lenders think the Vatican is standing behind the loans. If the Vatican Bank tells a lender it controls a company, that lender does not ask many follow-up questions. And so real money, hundreds of millions, flows to companies that exist mostly on paper, in countries no one has visited, on the strength of a letterhead. Now here is where the paper trail turns ugly. Those comfort letters are paired with a secret counter letter from Calvi promising to protect the Vatican Bank from any real risk. Outsiders see Vatican reassurance. Inside the room, Calvi is the one left holding the bomb if the loans blow up. And the man running the Vatican's side of this? Archbishop Paul Marcinkus, an American from Chicago, 6'4", known for one line that captures his entire approach to Vatican finances: "You can't run the church on Hail Marys." He has real financial power and, later, Vatican immunity that keeps him from ever being cross-examined. His public line is denial. But the loans, the comfort letters, and the collapsing structure all lead back to his institution. And the Vatican's previous favorite banker, a Sicilian named Michele Sindona, had already collapsed and would later be poisoned with cyanide-laced coffee in his prison cell. That is the track record. Then a separate investigation blows the story open. Italian police raid the villa of Licio Gelli and find a list of 962 members of a secret Masonic lodge called P2. On the list, 3 cabinet ministers, 43 members of parliament, 43 generals, 8 admirals, and the heads of all 3 of Italy's secret services. Roberto Calvi's name is on it. The head of the parliamentary commission investigating P2, Tina Anselmi, calls it what it is: a secret criminal organization, a state within a state. A single list of 962 names, politicians, generals, spy chiefs, found hidden in a villa. It brings down the Italian government. The P2 list changes the genre of the story. This is no longer just fraud inside a bank. P2 is not a social club. It is an operational network. Members protect each other from prosecution. They block investigations before they start. They place allies in judicial appointments, control newspaper coverage, and ensure that uncomfortable questions never reach the people who matter. That is what state within a state means in practice. Not a conspiracy theory, but a functioning system of mutual protection embedded inside Italian institutions. And Roberto Calvi is inside it. That explains why Calvi can be publicly disgraced and still remain in place. He is not operating alone. The cover is torn. Regulators are closing in, creditors are getting nervous. The Vatican wants distance without responsibility. And anyone whose money is trapped inside this structure now has a reason to panic. You can see the trap closing. Calvi knows too much about too many powerful people, and the only thing keeping him useful is the assumption that he can still fix this. Once that assumption breaks, he becomes something worse than a liability. He becomes a loose end. By June 1982, Calvi knows the end is coming. He writes to Pope John Paul II warning of a catastrophe of unimaginable proportions in which the Church would suffer the gravest damage. This is Calvi telling the Vatican that the machine protecting all of them is about to take them down with it. This is the part where the story turns into a thriller. Banco Ambrosiano collapses owing between $1.2 and $1.5 billion. That is not a bad quarter. It is a crater. On June 10th, Calvi shaves his mustache, takes a false passport under the name Gian Roberto Calvino, and flees Italy by private plane from Venice. He makes it to London. He checks into a small hotel near the river under a false name. For 8 days, he makes calls to Vatican contacts, to financiers, to anyone in the network that built him. He is trying to raise rescue money. The calls go unanswered. The contacts who took his calls for years stop picking up. The man who ran a billion-dollar machine is sitting alone in a hotel room, dialing numbers that no longer work. Once a money machine like this breaks, everyone around it does their own math. Creditors want answers. Allies want distance, and if Calvi cannot repay losses or keep names protected, he becomes dangerous to powerful partners at exactly the moment he is most exposed. The prosecution's theory, presented years later by prosecutor Luca Tescaroli, is blunt. Calvi was killed for having mismanaged the mafia's money. Blackfriars. Blackfriars. A dead banker linked to a secret Masonic lodge, found hanging under a bridge with that name, bricks in his pockets. If this were fiction, you would cut it for trying too hard. The first British inquest calls it suicide. But in 2002, a forensic report commissioned by Italian courts finds injuries to Calvi's neck inconsistent with hanging, and no rust, dirt, or paint on his shoes, which would have been there if he had climbed the scaffolding himself. The implication: he was taken to the bridge by boat and staged beneath it. In 2007, an Italian court rules formally, Roberto Calvi was murdered. In the same ruling, the court acquits every person accused of doing it, a murder with no murderers. After the collapse, the Vatican Bank pays $224 million to Banco Ambrosiano's creditors, calling it a recognition of moral involvement while denying any legal liability. That is $224 million on a $1.3 billion hole. Enough to confirm the Vatican was in the room, not enough to make anyone whole. When asked about the scandal, Archbishop Marcinkus never wavers. I have never done anything wrong. Calvi's son, Carlo, sees it differently. My father was an honest man, but he was a weak man. And in certain circles, weakness is not a pardonable sin. The $1.3 billion does not neatly reappear in a vault with a label on it. There are theories, and they are not small. One mafia informant, Francesco Marino Manoia, testifies that Cosa Nostra had hundreds of millions laundered through Ambrosiano, and that Calvi was killed for losing it. Investigative journalists have traced threads suggesting some of the money went to fund the Solidarity movement in Poland and the Contras in Nicaragua, covert anti-communist operations that the Vatican and Western intelligence agencies had reason to support. None of this has been proven beyond the testimony and the paper trail fragments. What is proven is simpler and worse. Over $1 billion moved through a system designed to make it untraceable, and when the system collapsed, no one could show where the money actually went. One phrase, letter of comfort, helped unlock over $1 billion in loans to shell companies. Soft language, hard debt. In 2013, 3 decades after the scandal, the Vatican Bank published its annual accounts for the first time in its history. It happened quietly, in a press release, without naming the scandal that made it necessary. You trust the logo, the app, the letterhead. Money moves before proof does. Calvi dies under Blackfriars Bridge. The Vatican pays hundreds of millions without admitting fault.